Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Evil Within Akumu difficulty, no upgrade, no key walkthrough. This is chapter 13, Casualties, and it's a twofer. This is part 1. This is one of my favourite levels on the game because I really like this domesticated urban environment. It reminds me of The Last of Us, and it reminds me of just what I enjoy about this kind of, broken down society dystopian setting of survival horror, which The Last of Us captured so elegantly. In this one, it's a little bit less elegant, and it's a little bit more crazy when it comes to just silly things they have you doing, but it's nonetheless enjoyable. There are 2 sections that are noticeable for potential difficulty jumps. The first one is the kitchen that I've mentioned earlier, which is essentially just a massive obstacle course of traps, and the traps involve luck and random number generation, so they're not very fun. And then the last part is all indicative of how good you are at dealing with keepers in closed environments. The good news is for that sequence is you only have to kill 3 of them to trigger the doorway, and the keepers are weak compared to the final keepers of the game. I know this because of my Knuckle Duster playthrough, where I was playing on Survivor and 1 punch killed the keeper through the entire game, and then the final 2 keepers took more than 1 punch, which tells you Chapter 15 is no joke for keepers. They are the toughest that they've ever been. But this is a new trap. It is an acid trap. It takes a very long time to defuse, so always make sure nobody is close to you when you're doing it, or you're probably going to get hit unless you cancel out. The most important thing to know about acid is actually not that it burns, it's that it's a one-hit kill on this game. Regardless of difficulty, if you run into one of those traps on casual with full life, you will die. You just keep on getting hit. It's this weird animation of him just getting hit and hit and hit, and he eventually falls down, and it's like, wow, that's an instant death, which is pretty interesting. It would be nice if you could shoot the vials of acid and it would somehow damage the trap so that it wouldn't work and it was a quick way of getting past them, but I honestly don't think you can, and at this moment in time I don't know a strategy of getting around them that's better than defusing them. I hope one exists, I just haven't found it yet. Such is the ignorance of this early walkthrough. The only time when the acid traps become a legitimate problem is during the kitchen section. And I say this because you stood there for a large amount of time, completely vulnerable to enemies. I got through the entire kitchen without shooting on Akumu. I got to the acid trap, and I was about a second away from defusing it, and one of those spiky skateboards hit me. Like, I can't even begin to tell you just how much bullshit you feel in those moments. And I think that's the reason why I think this game is so challenging to me on a personal level. It's not necessarily because it's the most difficult game I've ever played, or that its levels have the most difficult parts from any game I've played. It's because some of the times when you fail, you really feel like it's not your fault. And I hate to be the person who immediately says it isn't my fault, immediately laying blame elsewhere, because I think on a personal level, you don't develop well if you do that. You're not going to become a very grounded human being. You're not going to become a very good gamer if your first and only response to every failure is immediately to look for an excuse. And we all do it, guys. It's just one of those initial gut responses. And as long as you understand you do it, it's not a problem. It's the moment when you disconnect yourself from the reality of just how much you don't think you're responsible for your problems in life. And I know a lot of you are thinking right now DSP, which is an interesting debate by itself, but I have to talk shop because this is an interesting sequence. So, immediately off the spawn, I defuse that trap, and I wait for Mr. Shotgun here to turn around. Isn't it funny how all these guys have the double-barrel sawn-offs? The dude's a police officer. You could at least give him a gun. Give him like a snub-nosed. Not everybody's a bank robber, even though they're all wearing payday masks. But I stab him in the head, and then I throw a bottle behind me over to just that wall there. How this works is when it's not clipping on the ceiling, is it's going to get the Ruvik Haunted to come down that corridor. From this point onwards, you could hit him with a freeze bolt if you wanted to. I'm going to hit him with the Dirty Harry, and it's going to kill him. I'm going to make sure I'm close so I don't miss, and then I'm going to sit over here. If he's over where he was when I just shot him, no one in the vicinity will hear the magnum shot. Oh, I tell a lie. There's two strategies here, guys. If you throw the bottle round the corner a little bit further, these guys won't hear it. If you throw it where I did, they will hear it and you can do what I'm about to do. Line them up, shotgun, set them on fire. It's a very quick way of dealing with this sequence. Because the alternative is a lot of stealth kills and a lot of tension, and this just makes things much quicker. So the only people left now are a couple of Haunteds and another Ruvik clone. One Haunted will be on the balcony. There's the Ruvik clone just down the corridor past the trap. And then there's another one in the room coming up. So something to note, there are bear traps here, folks, and they're really well hidden. Oh, interesting. Did I kill that guy? Yeah, that might have been one of the people that followed me because of the bottle. So that was a success, but there's a bear trap. Don't step on it. And you can either go over the balcony and through the corridor with the bomb, or you can go and defuse the trap. The strategy here is simple. We're going to Magnum the next Ruvik clone, because it's my preferred strategy at this point. I've come to realise that the freeze bolt is perhaps the best way to do it, because Magnum rounds are very scarce, but I don't know the damage parameters on any of the guns. So I couldn't honestly tell you just what the correlation is between weapons. I don't know if 2 rifle bullets is the same as 1 Magnum round. I don't know if 50 pistol bullets is comparable to 1 Magnum round. I don't even know what the critical modifier is between torso and head. They could all be the same, and I keep mentioning it, don't I, that I would love this information, but because the game is so new, it just doesn't exist right now, and that is a really big shame. And once again, folks, if I ever get into a development position in a game studio, and I'm in position of power a la a creative director, which is something I would love to do, the stuff in my game, even if my game is 2 out of 10, IGN, biggest bag of shit ever, it's going to have all the things I wish games had that make it so that the player just knows exactly what they need to know in almost every situation about everything. Because one of the things games are so afraid of these days is to overwhelm player base with information. They want to make things simple. They want to have the most accessible, widest market demographic available so that the sales figures are higher. And they feel, I believe, that by giving too much information and having too much complexity, that they're going to ostracize the simpler gamers, the people who don't want to come here for crazy niche detail. You know, there's a reason that they call titles niche titles, and that's because a very small collective of people have the aptitude to understand them, play them, and enjoy them. And I think that's kind of dishonest to the average gamer. And it's one of the things that I believe children's games are criminals for, because they patronize kids, just the way that a game that doesn't necessarily hold your hand doesn't get marketed as heavily as a game that holds your hand through the entire thing, and the entire time it's yelling "fuck yeah" by your ear and playing Michael Bay's favourite music. Like, the only difference between those two games, aside from a severe discrepancy in both budget and creative redundancy, is the fact that they're marketed completely different. And it's the same with games for children. Children's games seem to think that we're giving birth to invalids, we're giving birth to children that are completely inept and have no process of understanding, problem solving, or, deduction. And it's madness. Today's children are tomorrow's, pioneers, are tomorrow's geniuses, are tomorrow's doctors, and they're all learning at different rates, they're all at different levels of maturity, different levels of intelligence. So having your game where, sure, some kids might struggle with it because not everybody can be gifted and not everybody can be, destined for intellectual awesomeness. Maybe some dude's really good at jacking off and he, gets in the jacking off world record book and that's his goal in life, and, if that's what he enjoys, so be it. But don't patronize him because you think all children are that way. And it's the same with games. It's the same with any other game. Like, Dark Souls isn't a game that only a small subset of people can play. It's a game that's been marketed in a very specific way to appeal only to people who like getting their bum probed savagely, brutally, and incredibly painfully. Because what is the first thing you hear about that game before you've even played it? Is just how difficult it is. So immediately there is a massive divide in people who associate difficulty and challenge and toughness with something bad and undesirable, who are not even going to remotely entertain the notion of playing your game. And immediately there, you've lost them. And you might lose them forever. Same with children's games. If the first puzzle in a children's game is literally so obvious, the child itself is face-palming, you have lost your demographic, because only people you're teaching to then is, people who would probably get just as much entertainment out of a piece of string than they would a piece of digital entertainment. So why waste all that money when you can just give the kid a cardboard box? And this is not to say that cardboard boxes aren't entertaining. I am a grown-ass man and I still play. I still give cardboard boxes a fair shake because they're pretty damn fun. But it's just this neutered feeling that we're getting right now in the current industry of gaming. We're getting more technical on a hardware perspective, where we can do things we've never dreamed of we would ever be able to do, and we're not using it because we're afraid that people aren't going to understand it, that we're not explaining it right, that people aren't going to be willing to invest the time. Because unless your game, can be played in 40-second sections in between the adverts on MTV, no one's going to be interested in it. Because, as I keep mentioning, we live in this attention, hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, crazy society of people who have no attention spans. Speaking of, here is the Keeper. So, we're going to fight him later on. If you're wondering what he's doing here, he's actually cutting the heads off the Haunted, because he hunts for heads. And I think this is one of the best uses of sound design in the entire game, because for some reason he's scraping, I don't know if it's his hammer, he's scraping something. And it's so Hitchcockian in how great it is, because just that noise tells you that there is something happening, there is something close, there is something building, and you don't know what it is, and you don't know when it's going to happen. And it is the bomb under the table not going off. It's perfect suspense, and it's so masterfully done. It's one of my favourite moments of the game, because you know exactly what it is because you've seen him, and then all you can do is hear him. And you're not too sure where he is, you're not too sure what he's doing, and you're not too sure if you have to fight him. And of course on a second playthrough and a third playthrough, you lose that, but you'll always remember that moment when you weren't quite sure, and it's a really good feeling, and it's a really good piece of game design. This particular sequence, you can fight him actually. I believe he only spawns a limited amount of time, but the entire game is kind of a blur at this moment in time, so I do apologise if I'm wrong on that. I know I killed him about 7 times, and every time you kill him you get 2,000 green gel, so it is a pretty decent way of getting some quick gel if you need it. However, the only place where he seems to spawn indefinitely is Chapter 7. He might spawn more times there, but I believe he stops. I know for a fact that inside the freezer that we're about to fight him in later on in this chapter, he will only spawn 5 times on Survivor, and then he stops coming. Because I was in that room punching him in the face, having a good time with him, getting some payback on him, and he just stopped coming. That was a fantastic shot there from me. Game said no, I said why, and it said because I'm a game, that's why. And we got on with it. But the next sequence, I'm not a fan of, folks. I'm going to try and be more positive than I probably should be for the sequence, because I personally think it's just horrible. It's really horrible, and it's a shame too, because it could have been really fun. I'm hoping, like with a lot of parts of this game, and this guide, so it works kind of well together, that some of the parts I had the most trouble with, in a month we'll have some super awesome sexy strategy that completely gets rid of all the bullshit and enables us to get through it. Like, I can't imagine what those strategies will be, because I spent a rather large chunk of my life last week in figuring out the ones you're watching, and I just could not see alternatives aside from, closing my eyes and hoping Michael Myers doesn't find me, when we all know the dude can walk and he'll be able to track you down if you've been in the car for 2 hours, because for some reason, when in a horror movie, walking is almost interdimensionally faster than any other mode of transport. And the only other thing that is as reliant as that, trope in those movies is the concept of somehow incapacitating the killer, yet not picking up his giant knife that's just next to him. So if he isn't dead, and he's making a very compelling argument that he is dead right now, he can get up and, oh, his knife is just there. That's handy. It's not like it's been used to cut his head off and his legs off and all his fingers and, you know, burn and melt the knife so he never finds it ever again. But I guess that's just me. Thank you very much for watching, and you take care now.